Welcome to British Focus. Today, we expose the shocking truth behind Keir Starmer and his Labour government. They promised to stand by pensioners, yet their actions tell a different story. A Conservative MP has just revealed Labour's betrayal in Westminster Hall, and not a single Labour MP showed up to defend their record. Are they abandoning Britain's elderly? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Now, let's dive into the video and see what really happened.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I beg to move that this House has considered government support for pensioners. I do so not just because pensioners represent an enormous portion of our population, over 10 million, but because the way we support pensioners impacts every single person in this country. From the start to the end of our careers, we should all aspire to a comfortable retirement for ourselves and for our loved ones. I know that this government understands that, because before the election they made big pitches to pensioners. The Work and Pensions Secretary said that Labour were, and I quote, determined to once again be the pensioners' party. The Prime Minister said that his Labour Party would, and again I quote, always be on the side of pensioners. If you recall, Labour's manifesto featured the heartbreaking story of Gary, a pensioner who was struggling to heat his house on his pension. I feel immensely for people like Gary, people who have struggled when times were really tough, people who voted with hope for a government that they believed would reduce their energy bills and look after vulnerable pensioners. I will gladly give way.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend on the excellent speech he's making? I heard from a pensioner in West Worcestershire only today who, on an income of £13,500, was stripped of his winter fuel allowance last year and is having to live in one room which he can afford to heat. Is he as shocked as I am to hear that example?
I thank my honourable friend for the intervention. I am absolutely shocked, and I'm going to come on to talk about, to mention a few stories of my own from constituents in my constituency, and they're very similar. And I think we're hearing these stories up and down the country, and I am absolutely shocked. I agree. I will gladly give way.
You're speaking very, very well about the challenges that older people are facing, but is it worthy just for the House to note that there's no Labour backbench MPs here to contribute to this debate? We have the Minister and the PPS, the payroll are here, so despite all the rhetoric during the general election campaign about supporting pensioners, they don't seem to be willing to be here to stand up for them in this debate.
Where are they? I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I had noted the same, and I was going to wait until the end of the debate, see if any snuck in on the off chance to make some...
sending a whip's message out.
You never know. Perhaps the whips are calling them now. So perhaps we'll come back to this at the end of the debate and see if any have turned up to defend the current government's record. The simple reality is that hope for more support was misplaced. What has happened instead? Energy bills are up, and support for vulnerable pensioners has been cut. The Prime Minister said in April that Britain's pensioners deserve politicians who will be straight with them, and I agree. And here is the truth. Whatever the failings the previous government had, whatever difficulties it had grappling with the impacts of COVID, the invasion of Ukraine, and indeed its own missteps at times, they always tried to support pensioners. As recently as March last year, the Pensions Minister actually admitted on social media that pensioners are an average of £1,000 better off as a result of policies since 2010. Perhaps the Minister may want to reflect on that in the summing up. Last winter, Gary might well have received £600 from his winter fuel payment and his pensioner cost of living payment. This winter, he might well have received nothing. Like an estimated 9.2 million pensioners losing their winter fuel payment this winter, Gary may have found himself without that vital support he received last winter to make that choice between heating and eating a little less difficult.
Will the honourable gentleman
I'll gladly give way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and he's making some really important points here, particularly around and using some examples of pensioners who find themselves trapped in this situation. does he think at the crux of this is it's about unfairness, but also it's the speed with which this policy decision, this political choice was made? Because even as recently as the 27th of April 2024, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, was saying Britain's pensioners deserve better. They deserve certainty, and for politicians to be straight with them so they can live their lives. This is not an example of fairness, it's not an example of certainty, and it's certainly not an example of being straight with pensioners.
Keir Starmer and his Labour government have once again proven that their promises are nothing more than empty words. Before the election, they painted themselves as the party of pensioners, claiming they would protect and support the most vulnerable in society. Yet, the moment they took power, their hypocrisy became clear. The blatant disregard for pensioners was exposed in a recent debate at Westminster Hall, where Conservative MP, Stevenson, tore apart Labour's broken commitments. And where were Labour MPs? Nowhere to be seen. Not a single Labour backbencher bothered to show up and defend their government's disgraceful treatment of pensioners. This is the same Keir Starmer who stood before the British public and vowed to always be on the side of pensioners. He used the heartbreaking story of Gary, a pensioner struggling to heat his home, to gain votes. And yet, after securing power, his government cut support for winter fuel payments, leaving millions of pensioners in an even worse situation. How can anyone take Starmer seriously when his own words contradict his actions? He promised fairness, certainty, and honesty, but pensioners are now facing skyrocketing energy bills and fewer benefits, all thanks to his government's decisions. And let's not forget the excuse machine that Labour has become. They will blame the previous government, global crises, or anything else to avoid accountability. But the truth is undeniable. Under the Conservative government, pensioners were on average £1,000 better off. Now, under Labour, support is being stripped away. Starmer stood in April and said, Britain's pensioners deserve politicians who will be straight with them. Well, here's the truth. He has lied to them. This is not leadership. This is betrayal. And what's worse, Labour doesn't even have the courage to defend its record in Parliament. If they truly cared about pensioners, they would have been present at the debate. Their absence speaks louder than any excuse they can fabricate. Keir Starmer and his government are failing the very people they promised to protect, and the British public must not let them get away with it. Starmer's failures don't stop at home. Now he's embarrassing Britain on the world stage. After betraying pensioners, he's off to Paris, trying to push a reckless military agenda. But even Germany's Chancellor wasn't having it, publicly shutting down his plan to deploy UK troops to Ukraine. Is Starmer completely out of his depth? Let's see how his disastrous foreign policy is unfolding. Keir Starmer has not only failed at home, but now he's humiliating himself and the United Kingdom on the world stage. His latest disaster? A reckless attempt to position Britain as a military leader in Ukraine, only to be shut down publicly by Germany's Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. This wasn't just a rejection, it was an outright embarrassment. Starmer walked into a meeting with European leaders in Paris expecting to gain influence, but instead, he was dismissed as naive, out of touch, and, frankly, a lightweight on foreign policy. Let's be clear, Starmer has no experience in handling international conflicts. His proposal for Britain to deploy troops to Ukraine wasn't just a miscalculation, it was a diplomatic disaster. Germany, Poland, and Spain all rejected his so-called peace plan, with Scholz going as far as saying he was irritated by Starmer's proposal. That's diplomatic language for this man has no idea what he's talking about. When was the last time you heard a German Chancellor publicly express irritation at a British Prime Minister? This isn't just a policy disagreement. This is a sign that Starmer lacks credibility on the international stage. Starmer's arrogance in assuming he could dictate terms to European leaders is staggering. He spoke about Britain playing a leading role in Ukraine's defense, but let's be honest, under his leadership, the UK is struggling to take care of its own people. How can he justify sending British troops abroad when his government is failing to provide basic support for pensioners, workers, and struggling families? It's another example of how out of touch he is with reality. And let's talk about the timing. Scholz slammed Starmer's proposal as completely premature and highly inappropriate. That's because real leaders understand that diplomacy and military intervention require careful calculation. Starmer, on the other hand, acts like a man desperate to prove himself, throwing around bold statements without thinking through the consequences. The UK cannot afford a leader who blunders his way through foreign policy while alienating key allies. But the most humiliating part? Starmer's failure to secure the support of Germany and other European nations has weakened Britain's position internationally. He went to Paris hoping to present himself as a strong leader, but instead, he came back exposed as weak, clueless, and incapable of handling global affairs. And let's not forget, this is the man who claimed Brexit was a disaster, yet here he is, proving that he has no ability to negotiate or lead on the European stage. If he can't even hold his own in a diplomatic meeting, how is he supposed to handle negotiations with world leaders in times of real crisis? The British public deserves better than a Prime Minister who is out of his depth, both at home and abroad. Starmer's failure in Paris is a warning sign of what's to come. If he's already embarrassing the UK at this level, imagine the damage he'll do in the years ahead. His leadership is weak, his judgment is poor, and his credibility is in shambles. How much more proof do we need before the country realizes that Keir Starmer is simply not fit to lead? Starmer's incompetence is no longer just a national issue. It's now an international embarrassment. His failure in Paris shows that he lacks the leadership, strategy, and respect needed to represent Britain on the world stage. What do you think about Starmer's humiliating blunder? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. See you in the next video.